Hello everybody and welcome to your Finance Helper. Today we will be focusing on the internal rate of return, short for IRR. We will focus on general formulas and Excel, so how we calculate it using a spreadsheet. So the internal rate of return is the interest rate that sets our net present value of the cash flows equal to zero. This is very useful to know if you have calculated the net present value and you want to evaluate the investment decision you have. Maybe you want to know how low or how high the interest rate must be in order for you to break even. It could also be very useful if you have to find out what the interest rate will be of a loan where you have the future value and you know the installments you are able to pay. So the IRR comes in very different formulas because it depends on the situation you are in. If you have two cash flows, then it's quite simple. You simply have your future value divided by your initial investment, P, to the power of 1 divided by the number of periods minus 1. This formula is equivalent to the formula for the compound annual growth rate. I will not be focusing on this growth rate or interpret it in any way. I just want to point out that these formulas are equivalent. But the IRR, what do you do if you have a growing perpetuity? Well, the formula changes a little bit and it is derived from the previous formula and from a perpetuity. However, I will not be going into details about that. This formula right here is simply the one that we are going to be using. What if we had an annuity? Would we be able to derive a formula from the present value of an annuity? Well, with 5 or more periods and general cash flows, there is no general formula to solve for R. Only by using a trial and error approach, which kind of just is when you put in an interest rate and hope for it to be the right one. So that would take ages for you to finish. So instead, we use a spreadsheet to calculate this, and we will simply jump right into it, where I will provide you with several examples for all kinds of internal rates of return you will find. So if we start by our first situation, if we have an internal rate of return with two cash flows. So suppose that you have an investment opportunity that requires a $1,000 investment today and it will provide a payoff of $1,500 in 5 years. So let's start out by putting in the numbers that we already know. Our investment P, that was $1,000. So we put that in. The future value was $1,500. And how many periods did we have? We have 5. So we simply calculate the internal rate of return using the formula right here, the same one from the PowerPoint. So we use the equal sign, open the parentheses, we take our future value divided by our investment, close the parentheses, to the power of a new parenthesis, 1 divided by number of periods 5, we close it again, and we minus by 1. This gives us an IRR of 8.45%. So what this means is that if you want this investment to break even, if you want to find out what the interest rate would be if our NPV was equal to 0, then it would be 8.45%. If we jump directly into the internal rate of return for a perpetuity, if we start with the problem that says that Jared just graduated with his master's degree and wants to start a business alone. He believes that he needs an initial investment of $2 million. The company will be able to generate a cash flow of $150,000 per year. This amount will grow by 4% per year thereafter. What is the internal rate of return of this investment opportunity? So the investments would be $2 million. So let's plug in 2 million. The growth or the cash flow, let's start by that. The cash flow was 150,000. Let's put that in. Our growth rate was 4%. I'll just put in 0.04. So the internal rate of return would be our cash flow. We open a parenthesis, cash flow divided by our investments plus our growth rate. This gives us an internal rate of return of 11.5%. So if the NPV of this investment opportunity is equal to 0, our interest rate would be 11.5%. If we jump straight into the IRR for an annuity, so this is a little bit different because of the way that an annuity is structured. So if we go through an example, so assume that the World Bank will offer you a loan of $40,000. You are offered financing with no down payments and 4 annual payments of $15,000. So let's start out by plugging in the numbers we have right here. So the payments that we are going to be paying are cash outflows. So remember, those must be negative. So we put in negative $15,000. The present value is the loan that we are going to receive. So that must be 40,000. So we put in 40,000. Remember, that's a cash inflow, so that is positive. Now periods we have. Well, this is going to be 4. So we put in 4 periods. The future value of the loan is going to be 0 since we want to pay off the whole loan. So we simply put in 0. So calculating the IRR for an annuity can be done in several ways. You can also create something called an NPV profile. I will show that how you do that in another video. It is not relevant right now because the way that this loan is structured, that you have a cash inflow in the beginning and you simply pay it off without having any additional cash inflows and without skipping any payments. Because you can run into situations where you have multiple IRRs or when you don't have an IRR at all. This actually doesn't. This affects you since you are unable to make any decisions with the IRR, and you must base your decision on the NPV itself. So if we just use the formulas that Excel provides us to calculate the IRR for an annuity, you can use something called the rate formula. So the way you do that is that you open Excel and you simply put in rates. You take the one right here, press the tab button to choose the one. NPER, that is simply the spreadsheet's notation for the number of periods. So that is N. That is N. So we put in 4, put in comma. PMT is spreadsheet's notation for payments. So you put in minus 15. Present value is the amount of money we get, so that is 40,000. And your future value was 0. So, comma again, type, payments are at the end of the period. And now there is the last one called guess. So we use the guess if we are going to create an NPV profile. We're not going to use it this time, so just ignore it this time. It is also in brackets, which means that it's not necessary to fill that one out. Close the parentheses and enter. So we have an IRR of 18.45%. This can also be calculated differently. We can use Excel's own IRR function. And this is also the one I will be using when I create an NPV profile. So the way we do this is that we simply put in the cash flows that we are given. So at today, in date 0, we have the cash inflow. So that must be 40,000. So we put in 40,000. Then we have 4 payments of 15,000. So we put those in. Equals 15,000 negative. You can bind this cell. So if you lock it by pressing F4, and enter. We can then just drag it over so you don't have to put it in every time. There you go. The way you use your IRR function is by pressing equals IRR. Sorry, there we go. Tab. Then you simply have to highlight all of the cash flows like this, close the parentheses, and enter. And you get the same results. So the way that you interpret this is that you can have a maximum of 18.45%. So when the NPV is equal to 0, that is when our interest rate is at 18.45%. Okay, so that was it for this time. So thank you very much for watching Your Finance Helper. I will very soon be posting a new video about how to create the NPV profile, how you can evaluate investment decisions differently when you have multiple IRRs or when you don't have an IRR at all. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.